Well, hello folks out there in YouTube land. Big news coming. Yeah, it looks like a huge settlement is imminent. 2.7 plus billion. House versus the NCAA. They're trying to combine all of these court cases, and it's going to be huge.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
And Ross Dellinger's been putting out all kinds of information, the breakdown as far as who's responsible for what of the 2.77 billion in damages. And realize they're trying to put together 4 different cases all into one settlement. And some of it has to do with back damages, some of it has to do with revenue sharing, and they're trying to do it all under one settlement. And the reason they're such in a hurry to get that done this week, there are deadlines. The first one being Fontenot versus the NCAA. They have a hearing Thursday of this week, which is the 23rd. So they're trying to get all this done by then. And without a settlement, understand if they lose these cases, they could be on the hook for $20 billion, which would force them into bankruptcy. And that's a big mess that really, I don't even know that the plaintiffs want all that because it wouldn't be good. So what I've done is I've tried to break this down. You know, they've shown the numbers here of how they're going to do this, the damages part, and then also how the Division I schools are going to start all the revenue sharing and all that. And rather than sit here and go through the numbers and do all that, I just went ahead and put it in charts because I know you folks prefer that. So for the back damages of $2.77 billion over 10 years, the Power 5 schools, or now Power 4 really, are going to pay 40%, which is $1.1 billion. The NCAA is going to pay $1.1 billion. The group of 5 will need to come up with $450 million, and then the other D1 schools will have to come up with $50 to $100 million, depending on the exact number. And in reality, the schools are really paying it because the NCAA, yeah, their 40% is going to come from reduced payments to the schools from their normal $790 million they pay out from basically March Madness, the NCAA tournament. They're going to take that from $790 down to around $620, and they'll do that over 10 years, and that'll be the $1.1 billion. Then, like say, the Power 4 schools, which is SEC, ACC, and all that, Big 10, Big 12, they're going to pay their $1.1 billion, and then, like say, Group of 5, et cetera, will pay the rest. Now, the other part of this settlement is revenue sharing, and I put that on a chart for you. And this is an opt-in or opt-out, but obviously all the big-time Power 4 schools are going to do this, and I'm sure many of the Group of 5 will certainly be involved. But it's about 17 to 22 million a year. Let's just call it 20 million a year in revenue sharing that each of the schools will need to pay out to players. They're also going to pay about $2 million in damages, and there'll be additional scholarships of about $10 million. It's going to cost each school about $30 million bucks. Now realize you don't have to opt in to the revenue sharing, but if you don't, you're going to get way left behind. So you're pretty much going to have to if you want to compete. So there's 2 big phases of this settlement, the 2.7 plus for the damages, and then the revenue sharing moving forward. And what they're hoping is this protects them from additional lawsuits in the future. What they're going to really need is some antitrust protection from the Congress, which I don't know if they might get it if they're paying out all this money. But realize Title IX is going to have a say in this. And when you think about paying out all this money of $20 million a year to the players, Title IX is not going to sit there and go, oh, well, you know what? The football team's bringing in 80 or 90% of this money that you're going to be paying out. So that's fine if the guys get 80 or 90%. That's not going to happen.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
Title IX is going to pop in there and go, hey, 50-50, buddy. That's the law. So when that happens, you're going to have a lot of issues going forward with budgets, because realize all these colleges and schools have been working with budgets where they're not doing revenue sharing. So they spend money, they hire to that. Well, now all of a sudden they're going to have this huge shortfall of 30 million bucks approximately. So where is that savings going to come from? Well, first of all, they're going to have to start cutting administrative positions. They're probably going to have to cut some teams, non-revenue sport teams, Olympic sports and things like that. And they're not going to be able to pay coaches as much as they've been able to. Now, I'm sure the big-time schools will still pay their head coaches huge money, but even they may have to cut back on additional staff and all the things that they do, because this is a whole big change in the fundamental financial structure of how these schools work as far as their athletic departments and all of that. So when you reduce it by 20%, which is basically the percentage of total revenue they want to share, that really is going to put a fly in the ointment as far as budgeting is concerned. So we're going to see massive changes when it comes to all of these formulas. You're also going to have a lot of these smaller leagues too that are really not going to be happy because, look, they're not profitable. And now they're going to have to pay a bunch of money. And here's a prime example of the Big East, which is not part of the Power Four, and they're really not Group of Five either. They're just sort of out there as their own conference. And Big East commissioner, according to Ross Dellinger, says her name is Val Ackerman, strongly objects to a $70 million tab her league may owe in damages and seeks a new plan to the one the NCAA and Power Five orchestrated, she writes in the letter. Now let's talk about NIL. I don't think this really answers the question of whether there'll still be NIL or not. I think there will be, because realize if you cut this in half, and let's say they're revenue sharing with the football team and the women's teams and all of that, you're not going to have enough money to be able to pay all these players what you're going to need to pay, especially if you're an Ohio State, a Georgia, a Tennessee, all these different big-time schools are going to be coming up short. So NIL will probably still exist, and it may help offset the shortcomings of a revenue-sharing program. And a lot of these smaller schools they're going to struggle with this. That just is what it boils down to. So NIL will almost be needed on top of this revenue sharing. So I don't think it answers the question of NIL at all. What it really boils down to is that the NCAA really doesn't have any choice, and nor do the Power Five schools or the Group of Five, because they're going to lose these lawsuits. You've already seen that with Supreme Court, Alston versus NCAA, and they're going to lose these other court cases. And then they're going to get hit with an amount of money they can't pay. It would literally destroy college sports. So that's why they're desperate. I mean, honestly, they're just desperate to get this done. That's why they're agreeing to the 2.7 in damages. They're agreeing to the revenue sharing. They're trying to get all this stuff squared away, because all these are antitrust lawsuits. And also realize why that amount is going to be so big. If you win an antitrust lawsuit, the damages are tripled. So that's why it's such a crazy number.
No desire.
Settle! Settle, 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 settle!
As far as what it could become if they don't settle. So I expect that to happen this week. And they're talking about these various boards, the NCAA board and also the Power Five and the Group of Five, all voting on this before Thursday and trying to get a settlement in place before all this happens. Because once the ball gets rolling, it's going to be hard to stop it. So this is obviously a quick review on this. But I did want to get this out here so that you know what's happening this week. Be looking for all this to happen over the next few days. It's going to be, as the term they're using is seismic, it's going to change college football fundamentally forever, honestly. And whether or not they get any sort of antitrust exemption, at some point they're probably going to have it. Otherwise, I don't know if this stops lawsuits. There are attorneys that think it will, and maybe it does, but you're still going to have what some will term harassment lawsuits even after this. So at some point, you're probably going to have to get Congress involved, and I don't know, man. I just don't know if they're going to be willing to do that. So anyway, be looking for this next few days. It's going to be happening very, very quickly now because we have a deadline, and they don't want that Fontenote lawsuit to get rolling. That concerns them. So if you like this content, you want to keep up with this information, just hit this little button right here. It is the subscribe button. Won't cost you a dime. And right over here is the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.